Yeah. Yo, what time the plane leaving? Right. See you at the airport. Hey. I'm leaving on the next plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you know I'll never go. Even though you know I will, I'm a traveling man, moving through places, space and time.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas, Traveling Gunn. Welcome to another vlog of mine. It's going to be about reserve flight attendant life for a regional airline. So what I'm going to try to do is keep it as simple as possible and not try to get into too many details to try to confuse anybody that's trying to get a better understanding of how reserve life for a regional works. So for my company, when I started a year ago, I was on reserve for maybe 1 year exactly, in a few months, give or take. But that could vary from base to base because there are people who were hired with my company that had a line 2 months after training. It's just where I was based. They weren't sending any new flight attendants too, so I wasn't able to get a line. So during that year, what I'm gonna talk about today is, for one, bidding. When you're bidding for reserve, you're bidding for days off. You're not bidding for, the type of reserve as far as how many days you want. I mean, you can do that, but for the most part, you're bidding for just days off. So let's say, for instance, if you just want Saturday and Sunday off, you will bid for Saturday and Sunday. Most likely, depending on how senior you are on the reserve grid, you'll get it. I was fortunate enough to pretty much be able to get anything that I wanted as far as days off, because my class was pretty high, was pretty much the top of the seniority list for reserves in Atlanta. But also, when bidding for reserve, what you're bidding for is P1 and P2. And P1 is meaning they're able to call you between the hours of 4 a.m. and 6 p.m. P2 is they're able to contact you between 10 a.m. and 12 midnight. So those are different. Don't ask me what P stands for. I don't know. I just know that that's what it's called when we're bidding for which one to be available. So what I usually do is I bid for P1 because, in my logical thinking, people who call in are going to call in the morning. So therefore, they're going to need reserves in the morning for people who call in the night before or 2 hours prior to their showtime. So that's just what I did. Some people who don't like to wake up that early, they choose P2, so they have until 10 o'clock to be called. Now, granted, sometimes you do get those 4 a.m. calls. Majority of the time, they send you a notification the day before. So it varies. It just depends on how urgent they need someone to come in. And when they do call you, you get 2 hours. They have exactly 2 hours. Now, you may get sometimes where they call you at exactly 2 hours on the dot to get to the airport to check in for your flight. But for the most part, they do a pretty good job. At calling you, giving you at least 3 to 4 hours, or even if not, the day before. But yeah, pretty much, again, you're bidding for, when on reserve, you're bidding for just strictly days off, and whether you want to be called between 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. to midnight. Now, also, when it comes down to working, as far as other things that you can bid for, as to be called more, you have little options that you can bid for to be called more. As far as me, I wanted to work as much as possible, so I put every option that I could for them to be able to call me more or more often. Now, what I also started doing as well when I started bidding, I didn't learn this until probably 6 months in, I was able to change my reserve days around or swap them or drop them, anything like that. I didn't learn that until 6 months. So I kind of got into it late to where I could have had more days off if I wanted to. Also, with reserves, let's just say, for instance, your birthday is next month and you're bidding for December 12th and 13th off, you get that. As a reserve for my company, you get something what's called golden days, which are just guaranteed days off, basically. They do go by seniority. It's not guaranteed that you will get it, but let's say you wanted to turn your 2-day into a 4-day, you can put your bid for your 2 golden days for the 15th and the 16th. That way you celebrating your birthday for 4 days instead of just 2. But once again, it's seniority, whoever puts it in first. So if someone more senior than you wants those same exact days, they won't give it to you. Also, you get 2 per year, so it's not like 2 every month. You get 2 per year, and yeah, you get 2 per year. As far as when it comes to traveling while you're on reserve, not saying that it's impossible, but it's harder to get a string of consecutive days off, as far as 4 to 5 days off at a time on reserve. Not saying it's impossible. I've seen it happen before, but it's almost not likely going to happen. At best, you will have 3 days. So what I would recommend to any reserve, especially if they're not using you a lot and flying, so therefore, let's just say you don't have a lot of extra money to spend on traveling, look up day trips. I promise you, I did a lot of day trips while I was on reserve. I went to Seattle for lunch, had dinner in San Francisco, and came back to Atlanta all in one day. Well, I took the red eye from San Francisco back to Atlanta. I've been to Santiago, Chile. I did that as a day trip, which I had 3 days off, but it still was. I went to Santiago, Chile for a day, had like 13 hours on the ground. I didn't feel rushed. I did what I wanted to do. I've been to DC as a day trip before. And the reason I say day trips is because you're not spending a ton of money when you go on these day trips, because you're not paying for a hotel, so that cuts out. You're only spending on transportation, which I would advise public transportation, which is probably the cheapest that you can do. And you're not spending a ton of money on food unless you're just going, all out at some of these restaurants and trying different foods. But, to each his own. You just have to figure out what it is that you like and what you want to do. And also, another thing about reserve, it could be the best thing that happens to you, and it can be a straight nightmare. For example, I had my schedule changed one time 25 times within 30 minutes. So I was going, didn't know where I was going, and then eventually I ended up going back home. So it's one of those things that it's not, I personally don't look at anything negative. I look at it as the glass is halfway full versus half empty, or half full and not half empty. That's just me, how I look at things. You have to choose how you want to look at it. I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, it could be the best and the worst. The worst thing is I've had 6 stretch days of reserve where they called me for a turn, not a long turn, a short turn to like Augusta, something that's only a 30-minute flight. And I end up going home, and I end up calling, I'm calling to be released. And they would say, you don't have anything else for me? Are you sure? Just because the fact of I don't live close to the airport. And so for me to come back and forth to the airport for 6 days straight was kind of like a waste, and I wasn't really making any money on the type of trips that I was doing. So for me personally, I didn't like short turns, even though I was going back home the same exact day. Now, there are times where I had 6 day stretch and they used me for the whole 6 days, and it was lovely. Also, another thing that you have to get used to, let's say for instance, you get assigned a trip on your reserve block, and you see, I'm finna go here for, I have a good layover in, let's say for instance, I had a good layover in DC. I started like, oh man, I can't wait to get to DC, do these things, do this. And then as soon as I got to New York to get ready to take that flight from DC, changed my schedule and said, nope, you're going back home. We're deadheading you back home to Atlanta. You're done for the day. So like I said, it has its blessings and it has its curses. It's just depending on how you look at it. just know that you're going to be crew scheduling's puppet until you get off reserve, because they can do whatever they want to with you as far as change your schedule, to send you here, send you there. So if somebody that's newer getting into this, that's something that you have to get used to as well, as far as them changing your schedule at a moment's notice. So it can happen at any time, anywhere, no matter what you're doing in the middle of the trip, it can change. So you have to get used to that. Also, another thing, I've heard a lot of reservists say that they don't make any money. So what I say to this is, I personally made more than what my schedule base salary for first year was supposed to be. And what I did was, once I figured out how the bidding system worked, I started bidding for strings of days off. Like at most I would do 4, and I did it at the end of the month, because let's say you want, and the reason why I say do it at the end of the month is because you want to see if they use you at the beginning of the month. And that way you can make a choice of, do I pick up a trip or do I want to go travel somewhere? So that's why I would say do it at the end of the month, and that way you'll know what they did with you towards the first half of the month. And that way you're not you're not just working all the time. You can reward yourself, which is why most of the people who started being flight attendant or got in aviation business was so they could be able to travel the world and be able to see and do things. I don't think there's anybody that got into the field that just wants to work, and that's it. So, and then what you could do is, once you get those days off, you can move your reserve days around if you are able to, and try to pick up a trip. And, some line holders, they offer money because they need those particular days off, or you can just pick up a trip, and that's more money that you will have because it's above your guarantee that you get. So that's how you are able to make a little bit of extra money while on reserve. And like I said, there are a lot of people who work reserve and they don't need to work, or they don't want to get called that much, so they pick the last to be out on everything. And if you're not that fortunate enough, you have to work, you have to want to fly. And I know sometimes, especially on reserve, it'll get draining, like, oh my God, they're calling me again. It happens. It happens. And then there are times where you have a stretch of reserve and they don't call you at all for the whole day. So you just have to know how your airline works. Just like there's low flying time, and then there's the summertime where they're going to use you every single day. And I think when I was on reserve for those 3 months, they used me every day I had reserve days, to where I'm on reserve and I hit 100 hours all 3 months. That's how much I was used during the summertime. Then once September, October, I wasn't really being used a lot, like barely making over 75 hours. So it's just, you have to kind of play it by ear and do what's best for you. That's the only thing I can say. Again, reserve life can be tough, it can be hard, but what you should do is, if you're working, always reward yourself with the trip, whether it's for a day or 2. Don't ever feel like you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything because you say you don't have any money. No, you have money, you spend it on what you want to spend it on. Let's just say if you stay at home for a weekend, you're going to spend $40 eating out, versus you could just take a trip somewhere to the West Coast and have dinner in San Francisco, Seattle, San Diego, LA, and come back. For me, it's worth it because it just gives me that sense of, I'm rewarding myself for the hard work that you have done, whether it's for a day or not. Because when you're working a 9 to 5, a lot of people do weekend getaways. Not once do they say, oh, that's not enough time. No, because you still did weekend getaways. So what's the difference here now that you're in the aviation industry? Reward yourself for the hard work. Always remember, reserve can be hard, it can be easy, but look at it that the glass is halfway full and not half empty. I don't know why I keep saying halfway. Half empty, half full versus half empty. And that's just my take on reserve life. Again, it doesn't last long. Also, if you want to move up faster, promote your job and tell people to come apply, and that boosts your seniority up a ton. So, you know, it's just one of those things. This is an industry where it is seniority driven, and you have to have people under you to push you up to be able to move on up in seniority. So, like I said, reserve life can be hard, and it can be taxing, especially if you don't live in base. You have to get a crash pad, because like I said, there are times where you're in your crash pad and you don't get used, and let's say it's for the holidays, which you have a stretch of reserve days during the holidays. It can be hard on some people. You know, you can't go home, you can't see your family. You know, the only thing you can do is talk to them on the phone and just say Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, Happy Birthday, whatever it is. Again, it doesn't last long. Push through it and look at everything from a positive spectrum versus a negative. And always remind yourself the reason why you started doing this in the first place. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I'm going to call it a night. To my new subscribers, thank you for subscribing. To my previous subscribers, thank you for supporting. I'm very humbled to have all of you supporting my channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. If there's any videos or anything that you would like to know, any topic, just let me know in the comment section below, and I'll make those videos for you. And I'm gonna leave you with a quote today. Someday you'll look back on this period in your life and be glad that you didn't give up. That's my time. Thank you. You all have a nice night.
Traveling man, moving through places, space and time. Got a lot of things I got to do, but God willing.